All right, it's 3 o'clock Eastern Time if you're in that time zone. This is Lisa Fox, and I'm with the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, and really excited to welcome you to this webinar on MTSS and early childhood. We don't have a huge crowd, which is fabulous. So that means you'll have an opportunity to ask questions live. As well as you can use the chat. If you've been in Zoom before, hopefully you can find your chat place, but really we'd love for you to pose questions live at points in this presentation as we're working together. I'm going to present for a little while, and then Kate Rogers will be joining me. She is from Vermont Agency of Education, and she's going to really give us a very robust state example of state systems for implementing MTSS. Kate is a little out of pocket at the moment. She'll be joining us as a presenter in time to present her section to us. So here's what we're going to do. I want to talk about MTSS, where it came from, and then its translation to early childhood implementation. And then I'll discuss with you how the pyramid model fits and where it fits in the conceptualization of MTSS. Then Kate will spend a large part of the time really sharing what does that really look like in a state, how do you fund it, how did they set it up, what are the components, and how's it working in the state of Vermont. So we'll have a really nice, robust example. I'll pause after my part so you can ask questions about content I've just presented. And then Kate will pause after her part, as well as invite you to ask your questions verbally if you have that capacity. We'll unmute your mics, so you'll hear your mics are unmuted when we get to the question part. When we unmute your mic, if you're not going to ask a question, you can remute it manually. So hopefully you can find all of those controls. They're either on the top of your screen or on the bottom of your screen. Now, Christine, is there anything else around the Q&A that I need to alert the participants about?
No.
Okay, great. All right, and then at the very end of this presentation, we hope you'll take just a minute or two to give us your feedback. Feedback, of course, is always really important to the TA centers, and we want to know about what you thought about this topic as well as other topics that you might have a need for. So let's get started. Oh, good, Kate is on. So I want to start by centering ourselves on what is an MTSS. And I'm going to pull a definition from Kent McIntosh and Steve Goodman, who have a book on MTSS that lots of people are accessing that's really breaks it down and illustrates what does this really look like within a school and within a district. And so this is from the school perspective, MTSS is a comprehensive framework that does academic, social, emotional, and behavioral of all, so all students, all children, provides resources and supports to both personnel and families. It's prevention-oriented, it's data-driven, it's team-based, and it includes multiple tiers of intervention, screening, progress monitoring, and data decision making. And I think one of the things when you think about this definition of the defining features of MTSS that I think about, and for all of us to think about, is the complexity inherent in a system, right? In a complex system to bring those evidence-based practices to the instruction of students and young children. So in that school world, and I took this graphic from my colleagues in Florida that I work closely with, Don Kincaid, and his colleagues who are working on MTSS and MTSS around social and behavior for K through 12 programs. These are what commonly are identified as the components of MTSS, the critical components. And the responsibility of putting these components in place, and this has implications for us thinking about when we bring it to EI and early childhood, what will this look like, is that it's a shared responsibility between the school, or from our framework from the program, and the district. So the organizing entity, right, that provides those services. That it's not incumbent on only on every individual district to put all these pieces together, but MTSS really requires planning and infrastructure at the district, at the larger entity, as well as within an individual program. And so those components are the multiple tiers of intervention. So that's really key, and that's what students get, or in our case, that's what children would get. And that would include everything, right? Curriculum, instruction, evidence-based practices, behavior support, or tertiary interventions if those things are needed. Problem solving is how an MTSS team at a district level, at a school level, or at a program level, how they decide who gets what. So how do we ensure that every individual child gets what they need? How do we do that in a way that is structured and we can measure the fidelity in which we do that? How do we do it by harnessing the collaborative energy and perspectives of a team? And how do we know it's making a difference? The other critical component is this leadership piece. So that there's leadership responsibilities, that we've identified what the practices are in our tiered interventions, that we're adhering to fidelity, that we're creating a climate and a culture within the program or school in that MTSS can happen, and that we're engaging in reciprocal coaching practices. Another component is the database decision-making, which is really key. That data system, what data systems are we going to use? Who collects data? How will data be used? Data, how do we take data and then summarize it in user-friendly ways that really help us either do our implementation fidelity better, our problem solving better, or the delivery of interventions in a more effective and efficient manner. Then there is capacity building. So if you're going to do all of this and get all of your practitioners on board, your teachers on board, then there's a heavy lift for professional development, for how will teams function, how will people use and learn about, use, and interpret data. So there are a lot of things to figure out around those pieces that are capacity building, kind of putting all of our procedures in place, training people then to be able to use those procedures, as well as people being able to do these practices that are in a multi-tiered system of support. And then the last major component outlined here is the whole notion of aligning all of this with our stakeholders. What do we share to the key stakeholders in the community, to people who receive services, our parents of children, being transparent, being inclusive, and being purposeful in the MTSS. So this is a huge, big lift, and a very complex, and I think the systems word is our hint there about the complexity inherent in MTSS. So what does that mean for the pyramid model? So some people say, oh, well, we have the pyramid model for young children's social, emotional, and behavioral competence. So we have an MTSS in essence. Well, the pyramid model represents practices. So what we did in the pyramid model is identify a framework of practices that are promotion practices for social emotional learning, that are prevention practices, so also the promotion of social emotional learning, but also the prevention of challenging behavior by being very intentional about how we teach them social and emotional skills, and then making sure that we provide for children with intervention for kids who present with behavioral challenges. So what we have is not an MTSS in this picture. What we have is a framework of practices. And if you think back to what I just presented, what we have is only one of those components, right? We have the tiered framework of interventions and the practices people would use for those interventions. And so the pyramid model as an MTS gives us our multi-tiered interventions, and I'm proud of that, and that's big stuff and important. But what it does in that picture I just showed you is it doesn't illustrate the problem-solving component, the leadership, the data and evaluation, the capacity and infrastructure, and the communication and collaboration. And so what that requires is that systems part. And so the way we achieve that in the pyramid model is through a leadership team. Whether the graphic I have up now is an illustration of what that looks like for preschool classroom programs, but even if we were bringing this multi-tiered system of support logic to our EI work, you would have a leadership team. Some of these pieces of the pie look a little different of what the actions are that they do. But to bring it to a systems approach, to really embrace the systems of the multi-tiered systems of support, you need a leadership team that's going to pay attention to each of those components. So in the pyramid model work, we have an implementation leadership team that broadly represents the program, that meets regularly, that develops the implementation plan, that looks at all those core components that I just discussed and uses data for decision making. And so the things that they would think about are things like staff buy-in, understanding of the framework, supportive of implementation, bi-directional feedback loops, family engagement, including a family member on the leadership team, but ensuring that families are engaged in every piece of it, that families understand what we're doing as key stakeholders, thinking about for the social, emotional, and behavioral MTSS, we want to establish program-wide or school-wide expectations and guide everyone to be on the same page, which is really important for the collaboration and for the capacity building. We then need to provide continuous professional development and coaching, because that, again, is the capacity building component of an MTSS. And so the core training and practices is important, but also the coaching to practitioners around pyramid practices in general, and then as we fine-tune our interventions around the delivery of specific interventions to children with fidelity. And so we also will want to use tools to understand where teachers are in their practices, if we're thinking about at a school level or preschool classroom level. For example, the tippy toes for our infant toddler classrooms, or the teapot for our pre-K classrooms, both to understand growth and implementation, but also to be able to build capacity to use these practices across kids and to differentiate the use of practices for kids who need more intensive supports as we think about our tiers of intervention. And then for the social emotional intervention, of course, we're doing a foundation of instruction to all kids, and really that's a part of that universal tier. I know our picture of the pyramid that's been around since 2003 doesn't illustrate it quite that way. Our intention is that all kids get very robust social, emotional, behavioral instruction, but then individual children may need more explicit instruction, more explicit interventions with increased opportunities to learn, to practice, and to receive feedback, and that we progress monitor when we do that intentional instruction, and that kids who present with behavior challenges access a behavior support plan process, receive a functional assessment, we partner with families and develop an intervention, a support plan that's implemented with fidelity, and that we progress monitor on those elements. So as we think about the pyramid becoming an MTSS, there's more pieces to use, right? More pieces that are illustrated in our picture of the pyramid. We need a progress monitoring piece, and we need to think about, in the MTSS parlance, what is universal for all, and then what are tier 2 kinds of things, and what will tier 3 look like. So I put this slide together just to give an illustration, to be ideas to bank, not the final word. I really feel like conceptualizing the pyramid model as an MTSS, we're in our early years of figuring out all those pieces. What Kate's going to share with you is a really sophisticated, but I think she too would say we're also figuring out and learning how to make this fit for childcare and early childhood programs. But so I put this together just to help us think about what are the components that might be there, and there are a lot built and kind of ready to use. So there are universal social emotional curricula that could be used at the universal curriculum level. We have some screening tools. I know we don't have great variation in a lot of screening tools, and some people feel like these screening tools might not give us exactly what we want, but we have some. ASQSC is a great one, and it's a nice way to engage families. We have developed an NCPMI, the Behavior Incident Report, which also would indicate to you kids who are having problem behavior. If people have adopted curriculum, they might have a curriculum embedded progress monitoring at that universal level. At tier 2, there are a couple of tier 2 interventions. First Steps, Hill Walkers is a tier 2 intervention that actually is available for people to access and purchase and implement. Best in Class is under development. That's a tier 2 intervention that Maureen Conroy at the University of Florida has been developing and researching. Tier 2 also could look like embedded systematic instruction. That is kind of a core practice, right, to our practices as early childhood special educators and early interventionists. And we have some supports to develop those instructional goals. So the social emotional assessment, I can't remember the SEAM acronym, but the SEAM from Jane Squires, which is a great curriculum-based measure around social emotional skills with great guidance on how to craft an individual goal for a child. The AEPS is another one that you might use. Again, the behavior rating, direct behavior ratings, the BIR, or kind of a homemade monitoring, systematic instruction and progress monitoring. And then for tier 3, prevent, teach, reinforce for young children, or an EI, prevent, teach, reinforce for families, manualizes the behavior support process and includes a progress monitoring. So there's a lot out there that can come to play to frame out how you bring the pyramid model into MTSS. And of course, included in all of that framing is the team using database decision-making in their work. And so teaming around, making sure they have the implementation infrastructure, knowing where teachers are with practices, and all of those kinds of features. A lot of resources, if you want to find out more about any of these things, you could find on challengingbehavior.org, which is the NCPMI website. So I want to move to questions about anything I just shared with you. You could have questions in the chat. I don't know if you have. Let's see. Or you could just speak up. So Christine, can you unmute?
They're unmuted. You may need to click on your name to enable the microphone.
All right. Anybody have a question or an observation?
Pam Miller has her hand raised. You should be able to speak now.
Pam, are you there? Can you unmute and speak?
Pam says her microphone's not working. Perhaps you could type it in the chat box. There's also a note from Cindy Brown, who is wondering, are there any TA available to help get started with the leadership team meetings?
So Cindy, National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations has rolled out some TA. At the local level, our TA has been really targeted towards state systems building and less about local level. I'm happy to respond to a directed question as well as get you resources around leadership teaming. You know, we have the state implementation guide, which is a great one, but then on the NCPMI website, we actually have developed a leadership team implementation manual that might be really helpful around pyramid work specifically. And then I think Kate will share with you some resources that they've developed around MTSS more broadly. All right, now we have some questions. Good question. What supports are provided through the EC MTSS framework around math and literacy? I haven't been doing tiered work around math. I work closely with colleagues who have been working on that through literacy, and actually Howard Goldstein and his colleagues have developed a suite of products around literacy, some of which are available through Paul Brooks. I think they're all tagged with Millie, and I don't know what Millie stands for, but pull up Paul Brooks and look there around literacy. I think what they've done in their MTSS work is really identified some specific, easy to implement interventions around literacy at a tier 2 and tier 3 level, and guidance around what should tier 1 look like. But and I don't know about math, but I'll invite anybody on the call who knows about some tools or resources around math to type in. Oh, is the PowerPoint available? So Christine, is there a way we can make the PowerPoint available? Kate and I are happy to share it.
It can be posted on online.
Perfect.
We can't share it during, but we can have all the materials posted online.
Yeah, we'll get it posted online, and if you want it sooner than later, you can shoot me an email, and I'm happy to email it to you. Any other pressing questions or comments? All right, well, if not, my email, we're going to show it at the very end of the presentation. So, and also if you go to the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, you can find my email address there. But we'll show them at the end of the presentation. Anyone else have a question? You're free to talk if you'd like to. Or a reflection. All right, so Kate, are you on, and are you good with just grabbing controls and sharing your slides?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna click share here. Okay. All right. Let's see how this works. Let me know if it comes up. Can you see it? Hello?
Yeah, sorry, Kate, I muted myself. We can see it. It looks great. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead then. So hi, everyone. I'm Kate Rogers from the Vermont Agency of Education, and thank you for the opportunity to share a bit of Vermont's story on how we got to where we are now from where we were 12 years ago when we started this work for early multi-tier systems of supports. Let me move on. On this screen, you'll see that we have some priorities and a focus for Vermont, and this has grown over the years. So we didn't absolutely start with these 3 priorities, but we have moved into developing that this is where we need to focus our efforts for our state. So the first one is, of course, to increase high quality, effective, inclusive practices for each and every child that is served within early childhood settings across the state. And those early childhood settings include public and private pre-K programs, Head Start, private childcare programs, home-based programs, and so on. So we do a broad stretch across community-based and public-based programs. The second is to increase equitable access and full participation for each and every child within those settings who are enrolled in those settings. Vermont is rural. We do have a city, Burlington, which is, our highest populated city, and most of you won't call it a metro, but we do. So we have to really focus on supports for children in those mountain areas and those rural areas that may not have the opportunity to access as many services as other children who are in the more centrally located city populations. The third priority is to reduce and eliminate suspension and expulsion. And over the past few years, and given the position statements that have come out of our national entities, we are absolutely focusing on developing guidance for reducing and ultimately eliminating suspension and expulsion here for young children. As we move forward, we also we've learned a lot of lessons, very valuable lessons over the last 12 years. The first one of those lessons is that we understood that we really needed to develop a set of guiding principles as a foundation for our work to move forward. And this set of guiding principles is to support inclusion for all children, but it is more broad than children with disabilities. It includes children who are culturally, linguistically, individually diverse with varying abilities and their families. So this was a 3-year commitment on a part of cross-sector stakeholders, including families, our higher ed institution, and our Agency of Human Services, Department of Health, Department of Mental Health, as we move forward with creating this set of guiding principles. We wanted to keep it simple, and we do have a 1-page document that was vetted statewide, and it took the 3 years to get that completed, but we're very proud of the fact that it was completed. Camille Catlett of the University of North Carolina supported and facilitated the work for developing the set of guiding principles, and now we're moving forward into to support programs and varying organizations on how to use this set of guiding principles in decision making that you were doing at the local level, say it's a recreation committee or it's a huge Head Start leadership team. So it really supports all, and we're very proud of that work. The other piece of work that was completed is our Vermont Early Learning Standards. And these were revised a few years ago, given the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge Grant funds. And previously, let me think, back in 2002, I believe was the prior version, was just for 3- and 4-year-olds. Well, we developed the new early learning standards to stretch from birth through grade 3. K through 3rd grade align with our Common Core standards. Vermont is a Common Core state. So we supported that work as well. And we have a new Vermont Early Learning Standards website with various resources and materials that all of our programs and families can access readily. So for early MTSS in Vermont, again, lessons learned. If you plan it, build it, secure it, maintain it, and ultimately sustain it, then of course all of our children will thrive and benefit from it. Educators as well as families will thrive as a result of this as well. So how did Vermont get from there to hear. And there's a saying in Vermont that our elder Vermonters typically say is, how do you get from here to there? And in Vermont, it's not easy to get from here to there because there's a mountain range down the center of the state. So that's a joke that folks say. So I'm using it here. And how did we fund it and pay for it? And that's always a question that pops up no matter what. The Agency of Education worked with the Agency of Human Services, where our Child Development Division sits, as well as the Department of Health and our Building Bright Futures State Advisory Council. And this is the Early Childhood Council that is required by Head Start regulations. We've taken it farther than that, and it's larger and encompasses more vision given our governor's early childhood action plan, and it is in state statute as well. We utilized to pay for early MTSS since 2007, and it's grown, so we haven't used these funding streams throughout the whole grant, but they've come to be part of funding the effort. So the first part is we passed universal pre-K, and that is publicly funded pre-K for each and every 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and 5-year-old not yet enrolled in kindergarten. They can access, and the school districts must offer 10 hours of publicly funded pre-K per week for children. Parents can choose where their child goes, and the school districts would pay for the child to go to that program. We utilized IDEA B, our special ed funding, Part B mostly. We utilized our state personnel development grants that came out of USDOE and the Office of Special Education Programs. We began early MTSS way back in 2007 with the SPIDIG grants. And then, of course, we received a Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant as we moved forward. And more recently, the Preschool Development Expansion Grant was awarded, and we utilized those funds to really look at quality criteria of what our programs implement and move as they move toward high quality, effective, inclusive instruction for each and every child. So the little web there, at the state level, interagency collaboration can be challenging, can be highly effective when it works well. There are numerous, if you can imagine, numerous meetings with almost the same individuals covering a lot of those meetings to come to consensus on what this means for an early MTSS statewide initiative. We recently applied for the new preschool development Birth to 5 grant, and we did receive an award. Part of that award and one of the activities within that award is to spearhead and maintain early MTSS moving forward and scaling up the effort statewide again. So we've made good effort, but we still have a lot of work to do to get to each and every program that would benefit from it. So I want to just say take a few minutes to share about Vermont's Universal Pre-K program. All school districts, as I just stated before, must offer UPK for each and every 3, 4, and 5-year-old. We operationalize that with public-private partnerships. The school districts partner with private child care programs who must apply to become a UPK program. Public schools also must apply to become UPK programs in order to benefit. Head Starts are part of that. Family childcare can be part of that, and licensed and regulated childcare. We have approximately almost 400 public and private partnership programs across the state. So for all those programs, some of them have been trained in early MTSS, and some of them still need to. So as we move our efforts forward, we promote early MTSS as a two-prong approach. And that two-prong approach looks at, of course, the evidence-based practices within the pyramid model itself and the systems building approach. You cannot have one without the other. And this was a huge lesson learned back in, I'd say about 2009, 2010. We started efforts as a CEFL state, the Center for Social Emotional Foundations for Early Learning, as well as a CEL state, which was the Center for Early Literacy Learning. And we moved forward with training over 500 educators in the pyramid model practices, given a wave of 3 rounds of cohorts. And a lot of that, the practices stayed in place at a lot of our programs. However, we're coming into the adoption of universal pre-K from our legislature in 2014-15, and we knew we needed to have the systems piece to secure maintenance and sustainability of pyramid model practices themselves. So we took some information. We shared information with our K-12 colleagues. They were moving MTSS out to the school districts, and we learned what their systems pieces entailed, and we started to adopt and adapt what those components were to support the implementation of pyramid model practices across the programs who are our cohort sites at that point in time. So the early multi-tier system of support, we promote, increases knowledge and the use of the evidence-based practices. Of course, it provides a system designed to ensure program-wide implementation and sustainability of those practices. We increase school districts' capacity to offer a full continuum of educational placement options for each children, including children with disabilities. And it builds a sustainable statewide system of high quality, inclusive early childhood learning environments for each child. Early MTSS builds cross-sector coordination and shared service delivery. We call it the mixed service delivery here in Vermont. And it builds a vertical alignment and a continuum with our K-12 multi-tiered systems of support. In order to do this, change takes time. And so you're not going to do this tomorrow if you're just going to be starting out, but it does take at least 3 to 5 years for a program to move into sustainability of a system. So we use implementation science as a framework to support our systems building within the cohort sites and within our approach as we move forward. And those implementation science phases are exploration, installation, initial implementation, full implementation, and ultimately sustainability. If you want to know more about implementation science, our ECTA site has a lot of great information on that to share. I can certainly share with you more about that and what programs need to address, their leadership teams need to address as they move forward with thinking about implementing an early MTSS system. What do they need to do? How do they do it? What funding sources are they going to be used to maintain that and then ultimately sustain it? So change takes time, and that was a lesson learned as well. We spoke about early MTSS going laterally. I think this slide is a simple slide, but clearly illustrates that in Vermont, early MTSS is much more broad than school districts' pre-K programs. It's with childcare, it's with Head Start, it's with family home care programs as well. And then how do we align that with our K-12 MTSS? Our team at the Agency of Education are working closely to look at the components. We know there are differences, of course, related to age and related also to where programs sit. You might have an isolated childcare program trying to implement early MTSS and go program-wide, and you might have a huge school district with 10 classrooms. And what do they utilize as components to implement, to look at data and those pieces in order to scale up what they're doing as well. Given our early learning challenge grant, we did have 22 cohort sites for early MTSS over the past 3 to 4 years. 4 of those sites were chosen as our early/K-12 MTSS site, which they really worked on putting practices into place to fidelity, but even more so than that, really looked at systems building on what transition from pre-K to K looks like, what does K to first grade look like, and making sure that the leadership team was inclusive of pre-K as well as K-12, mostly K-3, K through 3rd grade, but really thoughtfully thinking about what their system looks like and how they are supporting children through the continuum and the age trajectory as they grow and as they learn. 3 weeks ago in Florida, Vermont was part of the poster session, and this is just a clip of our poster that we presented down at NTI, and I'm going to highlight, it looks like a lot, but I'm going to highlight a few pieces of it. The components of our early MTSS system in Vermont. You heard Lisa share the components of what the system looks like and what needs to occur in order to uphold the practices that we're hoping that will be implemented to fidelity. You can see what it says, a strong system of support that is inclusive of the leadership team. If you do not have a leadership team in place at the local, regional, or state level, this does not work. So it's so important that leadership teams are a continuous entity that meet and really look at data in order to support continuous improvements and moving forward with an MTSS system. Partnerships and collaboration absolutely include families, as well as early childhood mental health, the child care, the school district. So again, it's a mixed delivery system, and we try to embrace all. High quality, responsive, and learning environments. This is inclusive of ensuring that professional development opportunities are provided for our educators, administrators, and families, looking at social emotional development, early literacy, and we're not quite at math yet, and we're working toward that. For early literacy, my colleague, who is our 619, or early childhood special ed coordinator, has been part of the Council of Chief State School Officers work in developing an early literacy blueprint. And we are in the process of refining that, and hopefully we'll be posting that shortly. So that's a document that you may be interested. I forget who was asking about the literacy component here, but it might be something that you'd be interested in. I'm going to move forward. So having an early MTS system helps us to sustain the pyramid model practices. Again, the leadership team is incredibly important to maintain. We have developed a systems inventory of practice for leadership teams. We took the benchmarks of quality as well as our K-12 MTSS self-assessment and implementation rubrics and other sources, and developed from that information a systems inventory of practice, which focuses on the 5 components of an early MTSS system, and it has ratings, and it's a really great tool for our leadership teams to use, and they use that with the assistance of an external systems coach that help the leadership team move through that and then develop an action plan in order to address whatever they wanted to address for continuous improvement. We built a state cadre of pyramid model trainers and practice-based coaches. We still would like more because we need more, so we're moving forward with a new preschool development grant, B5, into continuing to build our state cadre of trainers and coaches as we move forward. The measures identified, as Lisa stressed as well, we utilize the TPOP, the ASQ. TS Gold is our statewide universal pre-K assessment progress monitoring tool, so we utilize that in order to not overwhelm our classroom teachers and gathering data that they already gather. So we're utilizing tools that they already are using, which is very beneficial. CLASS is part of our STAR system. We want more programs to begin to use CLASS, so we can certainly support the results of a class. We can support the teacher with coaches as well to implement best practice. The BIR, we are beginning to use the BIR, and we haven't put that as a requirement yet for our universal public and private pre-K programs, and we're moving toward doing that, though. We do collect suspension and expulsion data, but not the BIR at this point. But that's a plan waiting to happen. And we also utilize the Inclusive Classroom Profile, the ICP, and that is not, fewer programs are using that right now, and we have a few coaches. We're planning to do a new ICP training in June here, and moving that forward and hoping that the ICP is placed within our STARS quality rating system as well. And finally, we are in the middle of writing an early MTSS practice and implementation manual. And this manual will align with our K-12 MTSS field guide. So we're calling it a companion. And Judith Carter is helping to write the manual for Vermont. How am I doing with time, Lisa? Just want to check.
We have about 12 minutes left total. So.
Oh, okay. With Mari, sorry. So, all right, thank you. Our early MTSS is embedded into some state policy and practices, and we want it to be embedded even more so. What has happened this past legislative season is that the legislature's passed Act 173, which commits Vermont to using a pre-K through 12 MTSS system. And that's now in statute. And we are rewriting rules in order for school districts to begin to implement it. So that's still coming, but the procedures are being put into place. And this is, again, another piece that will help to sustain early MTSS as we move forward. I shared that our Building Bright Futures State Council we work with, they have adopted early MTSS as an effort that they are pursuing. working through our STARS, our quality rating improvement system, to make sure that early MTSS language, especially training on pyramid model practices and the systems building piece, is in there. Our governor's action plan includes early MTSS within that framework as well. Our professional development system, we're working hard in order to ensure that our early MTSS or pyramid model trainers and coaches are recognized within the broader early childhood professional development system. So in Vermont, we had that siloed. So we had education doing training, and we have early childhood or childcare doing training. So we want to make sure that any training that our early MTSS coaches and trainers are conducting is recognized in the broader professional development system. And so we're working on that. We will be credentialing our trainers and coaches, so they'll be recognized as a specialty trainer and coach, which is great. I mentioned the Vermont MTSS Field Guide, which is in its second revision. That's why it says 2.0. And it does include early education within this. It's K-12, but it does include early education. And I mentioned the companion document for early MTSS is in sync with this document. So language, there's common language, but when they get to the instruction and intervention, mostly the MTSS piece, the pyramid model piece, we have to make sure that it's age appropriate. And so we're making sure about that. And Judith and Sam are doing an awesome job on writing that and working with us on that. This is just a comparison slide from early MTSS components and our K MTSS alignment. If anyone wants that, I can certainly share this with you. I mentioned our systems inventory. This has been a key document to moving early MTSS out and forward. And again, given the benchmarks of quality and other documents, we are very proud of our systems inventory and the results that it has, and the improvements that programs have made because challenges were identified and they were able to move forward with those and conquer those. This slide is about feedback loops and supports for K-12 MTSS. You see it's the Agency of Education, Supervisory Union and School District Schools, and then pre-K, kindergarten, 1, 2, 3 classrooms. This is the early MTSS feedback loop and support loops. State interagencies that I showed you previously. The regional Building Bright Futures Councils, which are the Pyramid Model Consortium with Rob Corso, has worked on developing a regional kind of inventory of practices, if you will, to support their support of local programs. Then the feedback and support loops go from local childcare programs, universal pre-K, private pre-K, and all that to the classrooms, of course. I'll just go through these quick. These are the primary pieces of what makes early MTSS works in the programs themselves. Leadership teams are a must, systems coaches, practice-based coaches, and the evaluation of fidelity measures that Lisa shared before. Data. You can read that. Again, the tools that we utilize. I'm going to go by, these are teapot results. And I really want to thank our National TA Centers for all the work, Lisa, that your folks have done over the past years to make this happen for Vermont, to provide us with a framework to utilize and depend upon to move forward with our own work. So we really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. And
Yeah, do we have questions for Kate? Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
You can chat or talk. I have a feeling that the complexity, Kate, of what you shared is,
Oh, sorry.
it's a good thing, and they're wonderful tools. And so jot down Kate's email. It's pretty easy to remember, as well as my email. If there are things that you want, feel free to visit challengingbehavior.org. And I think, Christine, you're going to put our evaluation survey in the webinar chat.
Yes, it's
Great.
in there now.
Terrific. It's there now. We find that it's really fast and easy if you could just do it now in the last couple minutes of the time that we have with you. If you could click on that link in the chat and go ahead and do feedback about this webinar, as well as information that you'd like to have from the TA centers. And again, thank you so much for joining us. You can tell how excited we are about this content, and we're super excited that you were interested in it as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you.